My name is Emily Carter, and I used to believe I was the luckiest woman in the world. 2 years ago, I married Mark, tall, charming, a man who seemed to know exactly how to make a woman feel safe. We built our life together in a modest but warm home, filled with laughter, late-night conversations, and dreams about the future. And then there was Hannah, my best friend since college. She was my confidant, my partner in crime, my sister in everything but blood. I was the maid of honor at her wedding, even though it eventually crumbled. When her divorce happened, she cried in my arms, swore she'd never believe in love again. I believed every word. If only I had known. The first crack appeared one rainy Thursday night. I was working late at the small marketing firm where I handled client accounts, and Mark had texted me earlier, "Don't worry about dinner, Hannah's dropping by. We'll wait for you." It was innocent enough. Except when I got home 2 hours later, the living room smelled faintly of his cologne and there were 2 wine glasses on the coffee table, both half empty. Hannah was gone. Mark said she had left just before I arrived. I brushed it off. Maybe she didn't feel like staying. But then the small things started adding up. Hannah's perfume lingering in our hallway when she just dropped off some files. Mark suddenly wearing the new shirt I had never seen him open, claiming Hannah had gifted it for helping her move furniture. The 2 of them laughing at inside jokes I wasn't part of. Still, I told myself I was being paranoid. They were my husband and my best friend, 2 of the people I trusted most. Who would even think of such a betrayal? It wasn't until Mark's birthday that the truth began to show itself. I had planned a surprise party at our house, invited a few close friends, including Hannah. But that morning, he told me he had a work emergency and couldn't be home. I almost canceled, but Hannah insisted we still celebrate, just a small gathering without him. That night, after everyone left, I went upstairs to put away coats and found something on Mark's nightstand, a delicate gold bracelet, engraved with "Yours always, H." It felt like my stomach dropped into my shoes. I stood there in the quiet, holding that tiny piece of metal that screamed the truth I didn't want to hear. I wanted to believe there was another explanation. I wanted to believe my marriage wasn't already rotting from the inside. The next few weeks were torture. I smiled at Mark, laughed with Hannah, and pretended I didn't notice how often they texted each other. I checked Mark's phone one night while he showered, my hands shaking so hard I almost dropped it, and found messages that burned into my memory. "Hannah, last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you. Mark, me neither. Wish you didn't come home so soon, I couldn't breathe." It was like the air had been sucked out of the room. My hands went cold, my knees buckled, and I had to sit down on the edge of the bed just to steady myself. In that moment, I realized 2 things. 1, my marriage was over in every way that mattered. 2, I wasn't going to let them walk away without consequences. I didn't scream. I didn't confront them, not yet. Instead, I smiled at breakfast the next morning, asked Mark about his long hours, and even joked with Hannah on the phone. Every word tasted like poison, but I kept my mask in place. Because if they thought I was blind, I was about to show them just how clearly I could see. The hardest part wasn't pretending to be okay, it was staying close enough to watch them without letting my rage show. Every smile I gave Mark, every friendly chat I had with Hannah, was an act. Behind it, my mind was quietly stitching together a plan that would take everything from them in one clean, devastating sweep. The first thing I needed was proof. Not the kind of flimsy suspicion people could brush off, but undeniable, inescapable evidence that would leave them exposed. So, I started small. I bought a second-hand nanny cam from an online marketplace, just a tiny black cube disguised as a charger. I placed it in the corner of our home office, a room Mark sometimes used when Hannah came over to discuss projects. I told him I'd reorganize the space for my own work. A week later, I had my first clip, Hannah leaning against the desk, smiling in a way no best friend should, Mark standing far too close. He brushed a strand of her hair behind her ear and whispered something that made her laugh softly. No kissing, yet, but enough to confirm they were comfortable in their secret little bubble. I needed more. So I installed another camera, this time in the living room, tucked between books on the shelf. That's where it happened. 2 days later, while I was out grocery shopping, Hannah showed up with a bottle of wine. They sat close on the couch, his hand resting on her knee, her head tilted toward him. Then, without hesitation, he kissed her. I watched the footage alone in my bedroom that night, my fingers gripping the edge of my laptop so hard they hurt. I felt sick, but the sickness quickly turned into something sharper: purpose. With the evidence in hand, I began working on Phase 2, the financial trap. Mark and I shared a joint account, but he had no idea I'd quietly opened one in my name months ago when we started having minor arguments about money. I began moving small amounts over, nothing he would notice right away. I also knew about his little side investments, stocks and a private crypto wallet he thought I didn't know existed. But I did. Hannah had once drunkenly mentioned it to me, and I had stored the information away. Using the forgot password function and some details only a wife would know, I gained access. By the time my plan was ready, I had enough to not only ruin their relationship but also strip them of every financial comfort they'd clung to. The next step was timing. I needed them both in the same place, completely unaware, thinking I was still the clueless, devoted wife. Mark's upcoming birthday provided the perfect stage. Hannah had already hinted she wanted to do something special for him. I told her I'd help organize it, a private dinner at our house. I pretended to be the picture of affection, ordering his favorite meal from a fancy caterer, decorating the dining room, even buying him a new watch as a gift. Inside, I was counting down the hours like a soldier before battle. That evening, everything was set. Candles glowed, the table was perfectly arranged, and I was dressed in the red silk dress Mark once said was his favorite. Hannah arrived early, looking stunning, her smile just a bit too bright when she saw him. We sat down to eat, laughter bouncing off the walls, the clink of wine glasses filling the air. I could feel the tension simmering just beneath the surface, but I kept my voice light, my eyes warm. And then, as dessert was served, I excused myself to the kitchen. What they didn't know was that the TV in the living room was queued up, ready to play a little birthday surprise of my own. When I returned, I had the remote in my hand and a smile on my lips. "Mark," I said sweetly, "I have something special for you." A highlight reel. The screen flickered to life, and there they were, caught in perfect, unforgiving clarity. Hannah's face drained of color. Mark froze mid-breath. The only sound was the soft clink of his fork hitting the plate. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The footage spoke louder than anything I could say. Mark's hands trembled as he reached for the remote, but I was faster. I pressed pause right on the frame where his lips were on hers, both of their eyes closed, completely lost in their betrayal. "Don't bother," I said, my voice calm in a way that scared even me. "I've got backups. Multiple ones. On cloud storage. On flash drives. Even printed stills, if you're into scrapbooking." Hannah's mouth opened, then closed again. She glanced at Mark as if he could save her, but his face was blank, caught between rage at being exposed and panic over what I might do next. I let the silence stretch until it felt like the air in the room was shrinking. Then I said, "You know what's funny? Betrayal doesn't hurt the most. It's realizing I was sharing my bed, my home, my life, with people who couldn't even be honest about wanting more." Mark tried to speak. "Emily, No," I cut him off, my voice slicing through the air. "You don't get to explain. You get to listen." I reached for the sleek envelope sitting by my wine glass. "Inside here," I continued, "are the documents transferring ownership of your side investments, Yes, the ones you thought I didn't know about, into my name. I already moved the cash. And before you ask, yes, I stayed within the law. Mostly. Mark's face went pale. What? Oh, and that joint account. Nearly empty. I've been siphoning little by little for months. That new car you love? Registered to me. You'll need my signature if you want to sell it. The mortgage? Paid off early with your own funds, but the deed is now in my name alone. Hannah's voice cracked. You can't just. Can't what? I asked, turning to her slowly. You walked into my home, into my marriage, and thought you could take him. So I took something from you, too. I cancelled the project contract you begged Mark to help you land. And I sent those networking emails you sent him to your boss, minus the context you prefer. Her eyes widened in horror. You didn't. Oh, I did. By Monday, you'll be unemployed. Maybe you two can bond over being broke. Mark finally snapped, slamming his fist on the table. This is insane. You're ruining lives. I smiled, cold and sharp. No, Mark. I'm just finishing what you started. I pulled out my phone and tapped a few times. Across the table, both of their phones lit up. The messages were identical, screenshots, videos, bank statements, all sent to every one of their closest contacts. Family. Friends. Work colleagues. The room was silent except for Hannah's choked sobs. I stood, my chair scraping against the floor. Dinner's over. I want you both gone before the hour is up. Leave the gifts, leave the wine. Consider it payment for services rendered. I walked upstairs without looking back, my pulse steady. From my bedroom window, I watched them leave together, both pale and shaking, their futures unraveling before they'd even reached the car. That night, I opened a bottle of champagne I'd been saving for our anniversary. I sat alone in the candlelight, sipping slowly, letting the quiet sink in. For the first time in months, I felt weightless. But I wasn't done. Not yet. The final stage of my plan was still waiting, one that would make sure neither of them could ever rebuild the life they had stolen from me. The following morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Not because I couldn't sleep, no. I'd slept like a baby for the first time in months, but because today was the day I was going to end them for good. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened my laptop. In my inbox sat a draft I'd been perfecting for weeks, a carefully constructed letter, addressed to every board member at Mark's company. Attached was a folder full of files, emails, hotel receipts, time-stamped photos, proof that their vice president of operations had been using company funds to bankroll business trips with a woman who just happened to be my best friend. I hit send. By the time the sun had fully risen, the first reply came in, "We need to talk. Urgently." While I waited for the fallout, I turned my attention to Hannah. She'd been freelancing for a lifestyle brand, one that marketed itself on integrity, honesty, and women supporting women. Oh, the irony. I drafted a polite but pointed email to the CEO, detailing Hannah's involvement with a married man, complete with evidence that she'd leveraged their affair to gain professional opportunities. The CEO replied within an hour, "Thank you for bringing this to our attention. This is not aligned with our values." 2 hours later, I got a text from a mutual friend, "Have you seen Facebook?" I opened the app. There they were, Mark and Hannah, plastered across my feed. Screenshots of their messages. Photos from their business trip in Miami. Videos from the very same camera footage I'd shown them the night before. And the comments. Oh, the comments. People they'd known for years were tearing into them. "How could you do this to Emily? Disgusting. I hope you lose everything. Karma's coming fast." I hadn't posted the leaks myself, I didn't need to. I'd sent them to the right people, and the fire spread on its own. By noon, Mark's company announced an internal investigation. He was suspended without pay, pending the outcome. Hannah's freelance profile vanished from the brand's website. I leaned back in my chair, savoring the quiet satisfaction. For months, I had been the one shrinking into the background, silencing my instincts, doubting my worth. But now they were the ones scrambling, their reputations burning to ash in real time. In the evening, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. It was Mark. His voice was low, almost broken. "Emily. Please. This is destroying me. You've made your point." I let the silence stretch for a beat, imagining him on the other end, sitting in some dark room with his head in his hands. "My point," I finally said, "was never just to hurt you, Mark. It was to make sure you understand that actions have consequences. And you're only halfway there." I hung up before he could reply. That night, I poured myself another glass of wine and stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker. Part of me thought I'd feel guilty by now. But I didn't. Not even a little. Because I wasn't done. Tomorrow, the final piece of my plan would fall into place, something so irreversible that neither Mark nor Hannah would ever recover. The next morning, I woke up with a strange sense of calm. It was the kind of stillness you feel just before a storm, when the air is heavy and electric, and you know something is about to break. I brewed a pot of coffee, took my time getting dressed, and slid a small black envelope into my bag. Inside was the last weapon in my arsenal, the one I'd been saving for the perfect moment. Mark still had one thing left to lose. Despite the scandal, he still owned a small investment property, a rental he'd inherited years ago. It wasn't much compared to the corporate salary he'd just lost, but it was his safety net. And unfortunately for him, he'd made the mistake of adding my name to the ownership documents when we first married, for convenience. Convenience for me now. I had already spoken to my lawyer. The divorce papers were ready, and in the settlement terms, I had claimed full ownership of that property in exchange for taking on a portion of his outstanding debts. It was a strategic move, one that looked like fair compromise on paper but, in reality, stripped him of the last steady source of income he had left. At exactly 11 a.m., I walked into his office building, the same building where he'd once paraded me around at holiday parties. Now, his name was no longer on the vice president's door. He was sitting at the reception area, looking like a shadow of the man he used to be, suit wrinkled, tie loose, hair a mess. Hannah wasn't there. I'd heard through the grapevine she'd left town 2 days ago. "Emily." He started, but I cut him off. "Save it. I'm not here to talk." I placed the black envelope on the table in front of him. "These are the final divorce papers. Sign them, and this ends here." His hands trembled as he opened it. He read the terms once, then again, his face paling. "You're taking the property?" he said, his voice hollow. I tilted my head. "I'm taking back what's owed to me. You took my trust, my marriage, my best friend. Consider this a refund." For a moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes, regret, maybe, or the slow realization that he'd underestimated me from the start. But he signed. He didn't have a choice. I stood, slipped the papers back into my bag, and turned to leave. "Oh, and Mark," I said over my shoulder. "Tell Hannah I hope she enjoyed Miami. It's probably the nicest trip she'll ever take again." When I stepped outside, the air felt lighter, cleaner. The storm had broken, and I was still standing. For months, I'd been the victim in their story. Today, I was the author of my own ending. And this ending? It was mine alone. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Tell me in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you love real stories with twists you'll never see coming, make sure to subscribe to At True Moments Life so you don't miss the next one. Your next favorite story might just be tomorrow's upload.